Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, I almost didn't do one of these today, but it's been a while. I recorded one actually Friday, Wednesday. It's crazy. I can't believe time flies. It's insane. Um, Almost didn't do one today. Today was one of my sort of core meeting hour days, which means I discovered a while ago that it's really easy to have meetings scheduled every day. And if you do that, then it just kind of, and I'm actually really good at context shifts, relatively speaking, but it still just interrupts your flow and it doesn't quite torpedo productivity, but it really kind of fucks with you. So I decided to sort of move all of my meetings to a couple days during the week. Well, a few days during the week. And I made a couple of days which are just, basically the idea is at least don't put anything there. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's the goal. Which is good on those days. It means that I end up with days that are just kind of back-to-back meetings, and it's really amazingly exhausting. Like, maybe this is just, I'm not the most sort of outgoing, extroverted person or whatever. I don't know. Whatever it is, I find it very, just draining. I feel drained. And it's not that the meetings were even particularly difficult. They went pretty well. A lot of them were like people presenting stuff to me. Some of them I'm engaged in pretty closely. I mean, you do have to focus and give feedback and this kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's not even that I was just like doing that much the whole time. It's just I find it draining. You're kind of focused, you're on, and there are certain activities where I can just kind of do them and they're not that exhausting. Meetings just take it out of me. But I did kind of want to do one today. The last one of these I recorded was Friday, I was starting to say. I haven't put that one up yet because it was so low energy that I might still do it, but it felt, at least while I was recording, I was just kind of really drained and kind of not. And I don't want to do that. I know I'm not like hyperkinetic or anything. This is not edited, so it's like bang. But I don't want to give you something like a drag to go through. This is, I think, it's something you can have on the background. It's not gonna. It may not like overly agitate you for the most part, but it's not gonna really like bore the fuck out of you. That's the goal. I joke about using it as a sleep aid. I hope, generally speaking, it's not that dull. But if it is, by all means, continue. But I wanted to do one today for a variety of reasons. But the biggest one is that this morning, and today is the 16th of September, 2020. This morning, I did my first solo. It's been something that I've been, basically, my flight instructor said that I was ready a few weeks ago. But the problem was we kept, it's an interesting thing. You don't think about this that much until you're starting to fly much. Maybe you do if you fly a lot. But when you actually are flying, as opposed to like riding in a plane, you start realizing like in the summer, especially in a small plane, in the summer and in Phoenix, when it's, 45 out or 40, it's really turbulent and bumpy. And there's almost always, wind, 8, 10 knots, doesn't matter that much. Not a huge wind by any means, doesn't feel, you might even call it a breeze, and it may be a little gusty. But when you're a new student pilot, or even probably, when you're seasoned, it's bumpy, it's turbulent, it's jerky. And, I was actually, the good thing about this is we kept going up, we kept planning these things, kept thinking, gonna go up, gonna do it. And we just did dual instruction for those because it was too turbulent to really, a nice calm day, not a ridiculous amount of traffic. That was another thing. Some days it's just, I don't know what the hell's going on. Some days at the airport, not that bad. Like this morning was actually pretty calm. In fact, part of this morning, it was almost dead, like eerie. but not that bad. Some days though, you get some just fucking crazy, like just, you can't even get a word in edgewise on the air traffic control. And you're talking, you want to talk to the tower and you have to like really find a little spot to insert yourself. And, he just didn't want to do that. I didn't mind not doing it. So kept going. Planned on it yesterday. Ended up being a little too crowded, but not too bad. This morning we went out, no wind at all. The traffic was great. It was just, it was a pretty perfect day. And the plane that I flew, I'm very glad that I practiced in these other planes. I don't know if it was the plane that I flew or just the conditions were perfect, but whatever it was so, like some of those planes that I flew or that I've flown, fight them, and they're really, you can do it. It's not that big of a deal, but it takes a lot of attention just to maintain the speed or kind of heading, whatever. And this one, I wasn't even trying, and it just was like bang on the speed that I was trying to hit. And, like I almost had to work to get off of it. It was really nice. So go up. The first solo landing was probably, I would say, I would say the best landing I've had. It was really, I was not expecting it to be that great. I mean, and I was expecting to be more nervous. I mean, maybe it's just because I've gone up so much on the dual instruction that it's become like almost second nature and routine, which is kind of awesome and surreal. But I wasn't particularly freaked out. It was just very much matter of fact, like, go up, go around, come down. I was like kind of exhilarated in a very positive way, and it was just, it was cool. I mean, I was just kind of like, I had a smile on my face pretty much the whole time, and it was just fucking surreal. It's like, holy shit. And I keep looking over where the instructor usually is, and you're like, there's nobody there. Holy crap. I gotta tell you, I mean, it was pretty awesome. And this is a small step. I have a lot more to go before I get my pilot's license. I still, have to do a lot of solo work, then start doing the maneuvers and things solo. And then after we've done a bit of that and feel kind of buttoned down, then we'll start doing cross countries and, dual cross country, solo cross country, go around, do some actual flight planning, do some night flights, and then we'll actually be done at a certain point. Well, done with this first tiny step. There's a lot more to go, but it feels pretty fucking cool. I have to tell you. I really, through this experience, I try to do things. I'm not somebody that likes to just kind of do the same stuff and be like in a rut too much. I mean, I'm somebody who, like, if I go to a restaurant, I will try several things, but I'll find the thing that I like and then I will pretty much stick to it. It's not that at least I don't see that as being in a rut. It's just I've found, sort of found the sort of place where I want, the thing that I want. Found my comfort zone. But I do like in life to kind of try things that stretch me a little bit, like learn new things. And I've done a lot of that. And there are things like, you start playing with SolidWorks. If you have never used SolidWorks and then you start using SolidWorks or Fusion 360 or Altium, or you start coding or doing VHDL or Verilog or whatever the fuck. When you start doing that, you feel like a fucking idiot. I mean, it is just basic stuff, or even the video editing. When I was first using Adobe Premiere, I could not believe how fucking hard it was just to like cut a piece of the video out. Something that seems like nothing, just to trim the beginning and the end. This is something right now I can do it without even thinking about. But in that moment where you feel utterly incompetent and lost, I think there's actually something very good to be had there. First off, being comfortable with that feeling. It's very easy. Like, some people get in a situation that they're not comfortable in, they're not familiar with, and they panic. And this is not productive. It's not something that's going to help you, generally speaking. You freeze up, you're like, oh shit. And it makes you fuck up more if you're freaked out. What you really would like to do, I think, is do enough things where you're not just used to doing this or doing that or doing the other thing. You're used to being uncomfortable. You're used to being in a situation that you're not really at full peace with. You're used to being in a situation where you're like struggling a little bit. And I think that feeling is honestly kind of essential. And one of the reasons I think it's essential is, I've talked about this a lot. This is one of the, in a very long, winding path, one of the things that kind of drove me to do podcasting, and eventually, if I ever write it, to write the Don't Buy Books Written by Doctors book that I aspire to someday do. And maybe I will do. But the reason that I want that is we have this horrible situation right now where people don't really understand expertise, they don't respect it, or you get like too much respect for expertise, but you don't have the right balance. You don't have people who understand what expertise means. That, you know, if I have a PhD in physics, if you ask me something about physics and I tell you something, even if I'm wrong, I'm probably wrong for better reasons than somebody else who might be right is. Which is not to say that I'm going to be wrong that often. Decent foundation and expertise. And similarly for software or machine learning or engineering of components or systems or whatever. You know, I'm pretty likely to know at least roughly what I'm talking about in these things. The problem today, or one of these problems, is that we have Google. And Google is great in many ways. Google is fantastic for getting information, getting an answer, you know, quickly. But it won't give you the understanding quickly. You know, you will have an answer, you'll have the knowledge, kind of, but you won't have the wisdom that comes with attaining that knowledge. Part of the expertise, I think, is that wisdom. And this is something that I really think you can't quite capture without going through the process of becoming an expert on something. It's one reason why I'm a huge believer in education, especially like, you know, K through 12 is great. I think everybody honestly should go to university. And I understand, you know, like Scott, some people want to be machinists or welders or artists, or, you know, give me any list of things that do not require, you know, don't require a bachelor's degree. The problem is the bachelor's degree, and this is a fucked up thing with how much education costs today. The bachelor's degree doesn't really, to be honest, prepare you that much for a job. There are things that you will learn in the process of it, but that is not the value of that degree. The PhD or the master's degree or whatever, the value in that, unless it's a technical degree, you know, my sister won't be happy about this, but like if you're getting an MD and you're becoming an expert in that, or a mechanic or whatever, you're studying the process of doing these things. And that does prepare you for a job. And that's good. But even then, hopefully you're getting this liberal arts sort of thing. And it's that collection of things that are not, they really have no direct bearing on your income or your job. And they shouldn't. They frankly shouldn't. They might, you know, it's nice when they do. And I will say this, I don't think I've ever studied anything that I've not used professionally. Even if you go to like, you know, philosophy of science or art history or something that you would think there's no way in hell. I've used it, you know, and it's just one of these things that if you have it in your tool belt and you know how to use it and you own it, you will find places for it. It's one of the things that drives me absolutely fucking bonkers when I hear people say all the time, yeah, why did I study calculus or algebra? Boo, boo, boo. I'm trying to stomp my feet. This is the one time that I kind of wish that I had the full frame because stomp my feet. But yeah, it's just like, no, it's not that you have to, like, because there are two things here. One, these things have value in and of themselves intrinsically, just for enriching your mind and your life and your experience. But also, not that, and again, not that you need to have this, but I guarantee if you really understand algebra, there are things I do almost on a daily basis that use algebra or even calculus or other things that you probably don't even know about, like some weird abstract algebra thing that just, or you've never done, you've never dealt with. And the thing is, I can use these things because I have them in my tool belt and I own them. And, I know, you see the problem, and if you don't know what the fuck to do, you see a nail and all you have is a screwdriver, well, yeah, you can pound it with the handle of the screwdriver. But if you have the fucking hammer, it's magically much easier. It's one of these things that you don't even know what you don't know, and you don't know what you're missing because you don't have it. It's like somebody from the 18th century saying, why would you want an iPhone? Why would you want, the internet or something like that? Well, there are lots of reasons. I mean, it's just, you would probably have to struggle a little bit to come up with them, but it's not that hard in reality. And again, though, I think everybody should go to university, and not because it's going to prepare you to be a better welder, but I will tell you this: if you want to be a welder and you take metallurgy and you start studying some of these things and you start learning about nucleation and solid state physics and this kind of stuff, I guarantee those things will make you a better welder. If you want to be a welder and you learn about art and style and design, product design, engineering, whatever, anything that you're learning, you can apply to be better at your craft. You absolutely can. And again, take something that seems completely irrelevant. You've studied of the history or something that just, you will find applications for it because you have it. You won't know that you don't have it if you don't have it. That's kind of part of the problem of this, because people don't have this stuff, and then they go to Google, they get the 5-cent answer to whatever they're looking for, which incidentally, algorithmically is the answer that they want because Google's set up to, and this is a fucked up thing that it's really ruining our planet, our whole fucking civilization. But Google, Facebook, Twitter, all of these things, they are set up to algorithmically kind of box us in and show us the stuff that we want to see, show us the stuff that we're expecting, that we're looking for specifically. Not the answer that we're looking for, but the answer that we're looking for, if that makes sense. They're not going to show you, oh, you want to know what this is, and then here's the actual best answer that we have from the best expert in the world. They will show you, you look up vaccines. If you're me, you'll find all kinds of stuff supporting vaccines. If you're some wacko nut job anti-vaxxer, you will find a crap ton of stuff supporting your positions. And you don't have the breadth or depth of knowledge to put that stuff in the context because you're not a fucking expert. Even if you happen to know a couple of terms, you've come through Google U and you've got all of this sort of balkanized community, insular community, where you have a bunch of people in their own echo chamber telling you stuff that's reinforcing your bullshit ideas. And then when you come out into the world, you're so hardened to reality, you can't escape it. You can't see it. You think everybody else is crazy because they're saying something that's totally different from everything that you've heard and learned in your little bubble. It's a very big problem. So oddly, I'm not gonna go on for too long today, but because I don't know if you can hear it, my voice is a little kind of spent, but I can definitely feel it whether you hear it or not. So I was, I don't know how this came up. I don't know what the fuck happened. I do know vaguely, like Scott Adams tweeted something shitty, as he does. It's kind of his thing. Somebody responded to it or retweeted it or whatever the fuck. I saw it. I responded. Kind of got into it with him. It was something. I mean, it was something ridiculous. Like, yeah, it was some bullshit about fascism, and I don't remember what started it, but at some point he's explaining that like Bernie Sanders is a fascist. I mean, come on, my fucking ass, he is. And like it's just there's this whole group of people who are really poisoning the well, and I don't know if they're doing it intentionally, like they know better and they're just fucking things up for people, or if they don't know better and they're just like ignorant but confident in their ignorance, so they're spreading a bunch of lies and just disinformation. Whatever it is, doesn't really matter because the end effect is the same. But, like he's saying these things that are just fucking ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous. Just ludicrous. And if everybody went to fucking school and took political science, for example, this stuff would not stand. People would see through it and they'd see how much of an idiot this asshole is. But they don't. A lot of people just lick that shit up. And so I'm there, I'm talking to him, get back and forth, and he does the thing which I think this is it's one of the awesome things that you can do on Twitter. Awesome. If you can't hear the sarcasm, that was draped in sarcasm. One of the great things you can do on Twitter, if you have, in his case, like 500,000 followers, you find somebody with a low number of followers relative to you. If you have 10 million followers, that person with 1 million followers is a low number. It's just relative. But in this case, it's like I've got less than 10K. He's got 500,000. Retweets me with some shitty comment. I don't even remember what it was. And then you get swarmed by a bunch of idiots, which honestly, to me, is neither here nor there. I'm pretty indifferent to it. Like sometimes I argue with these people, but it basically, it's not even the buzzing. The buzzing of flies is hard to ignore. This is more like something where if you want to fuck with them, you kind of can, but for the most part, you just kind of let them fuck with themselves. Especially on Twitter, I have something called a quality filter, and it's turned on. A lot of this noise kind of just, you don't even see it. And you actually have to go in, and then they kind of hide it and have a thing where you click it. And because I don't know, there's something wrong with me, I go in and click it and look at this stuff. And, it's like, oh my fucking God. And you look at this, and I'm looking and I'm seeing all of these accounts, and especially like his tweets, like he tweets something weird at me. And this is before the retweet thing. Tweet something weird, it's got like 7 likes instantly. I go through them and you look and they're like, one is the numbers from Lost and a picture that's not a picture. And then you see a bunch of other things that are just, let's just say highly suspect. Low numbers of followers, no name, nothing that can, they look fishy. They don't necessarily, and I'm not saying they're necessarily like fake accounts, because Twitter is an anonymous platform. You can, unless you're verified, you can basically say you're whatever the fuck you can say you're a carrot. And I guarantee, I don't know if there's, I've not looked it up. If you look up a carrot, there's probably an account that's just like a talking carrot or a parrot, whatever the fuck. But kind of a problem, I think, like from the inception of Twitter, but never mind that now. You have these things, and I would still say they're probably by and large kind of sock puppet accounts. And sock puppets are just often somebody with a fuck ton of accounts has a bunch of sort of burner accounts that they use to reply to stuff and just kind of partly to be anonymous and partly to make that one or several people look like more people than they are. But I start seeing this stuff and it reminds me of something. And I'm seeing all these replies later on and it reminds me of something. And I can't help but think that it's a weird thing. I've been, I guess, very online, so to speak, for a very long time. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when you're in a forum, something like this, very often there will be, most people are kind of cool. Most people are reasonable. And you can feel it. It comes across. In the text, it is incredible how much tone is conveyed by text. You know, there's no body language. It's like if you watch cars driving around, you get so much body language if you just pay attention to it. You can tell that guy doesn't have his blinker on, but he's going to turn up here. Or this person over here, you know, they don't have their indicator on, but they're going to slam on their brakes and cross in front of you. And you can just feel it. You can see there's something going on there. You can do this in text too. And the weird thing is, you'll get, whenever I've been in a forum, there's often it's a guy. Not always a guy. Usually a dude, a male guy. Guys somehow I use as a gender neuter term, or mixed gender term, but guy somehow is masculine. There's no self-consistency there, I'm sure. Anyway, often a dude, which I do mean masculinely, who, for some reason, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with these people, but this guy will have several accounts, often many accounts. And sometimes these accounts interact, or sometimes you're talking to them. And at first, you know, the first time you see it, you don't know. You don't know what's going on. You just assume it's a different person. But you can really feel, very quickly too, if you get kind of tuned in a little to it, you can really feel the tone, the sentence structure, the vocabulary, I don't know what it is, some combination of this stuff. You can feel this is generated by this person. You can feel if somebody comes on and they are mentally disturbed in some way, you can really get that. If somebody comes on and they're depressed, you can feel that. You can get, if they're manic, not maniac. Manic, you can feel it. You can get a lot just from the text. And even when people are trying intentionally to hide it, it kind of shines through. I'm not a big linguist guy. I've a little computational linguistics. I've taken a few like undergraduate level linguistic courses. I don't know enough to quite get what this is, but it's something I know people have studied, and it is crazy. Like speaker and author identification in text. It's not perfect by any means, but you can do a pretty good job. Surprisingly good with a surprisingly small corpus of stuff. And so you get that. And so I'm getting these things, and again, like it's the character and the tone of the people that like clicked something in my head. I'm like, this is fucking Gamergaters. And I don't mean that these are specifically the same people from Gamergate, but they basically are, by and large, the same people. Gamergate, if you don't know about it, in 2014, there's a whole bunch of bullshit, doesn't really matter. But basically a bunch of assholes online got together, kind of fed by 4chan and B-chan and all these fucking, you know, like really just pots of perdition where people get together, they talk about stuff, and then they go out into the world and just shit all over everything. And, you know, it's like a bunch of dudes all sucking each other's cocks and, you know, like, oh, women won't ever fuck me and say I'm an incel. I mean, come on, assholes. Go fuck yourselves. Yeah, I mean, it's just like they have this whole thing, and there's a whole construction that's just, I don't know, you can't, it's hard to comprehend and hard to fully express how much these people have, they've basically constructed an entire universe, which is built up in their minds, and it's the shared reality that they have, but you know, it's got all these bizarre rules and ideas about, you know, like a lot of it is centered in sexism. There's a lot of misogyny built in, a lot of racism, a lot of class stuff. But basically it comes down to, as far as I can tell, people who are probably underemployed, undereducated, or even if they've got education, they're kind of, you know, like not feeling very fulfilled and satisfied in life. And they're gamers often, you know. They're people that play video games. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not a fulfilling thing to do. You know, I mean, whatever else you may think of it, it is a thing to pass the time. it is not something where you're going to get real satisfaction out of it. Video gaming, it's just a time sink. It's like you might be smoking pot, you might be playing games. It's like getting drunk. It's not a bad thing. I'm not not judging you for doing it. And I've said this many times. I think we should have like if your goal in life is just to live a subsistence life and play video games and jack off all day, go fucking sick. I don't even care. I think, and the reason that I say this is not because I want you to be in that situation, but because that is the price of letting somebody who wants to be an artist or a poet or somebody who wants to start a company or do something, letting them do those things. You're going to have some people who do other stuff that I might judge more harshly or might not value as much. If it entertains you and if you have fun and you're not hurting anybody, that's fine. But I will say this, I do think if that is your life, you're not going to feel satisfied. You're going to know, this is one of the major problems in our world today. I think that many people have jobs which they know ultimately don't matter. They're not helping anybody. They're not doing something that makes a material difference in anybody's life. They're not spreading information. They're not spreading wisdom. They're not acquiring wisdom. They're not learning things. They're just sitting there. They're clocking in. They're clocking out, and doing stuff that, frankly, a robot could do, and maybe not quite with today's technology, but at some point. And they know it. And people have a deep-seated need, frankly, like almost, it's a universal thing, I think. Some people have it a little bit beaten out of them, but I think most of us have a fundamental need to feel like what we're doing matters. I mean, we evolved to live in a situation where from day to day, if we did the right things, we would continue to survive, and the people around us would. And if we did the wrong things, we might very well die or starve, or like who knows what the fuck would happen. And you've evolved for that. It doesn't really work that well when similarly, like you've evolved a metabolism to really care about sweet and salt and fat and hold on to calories because you might not get them again soon. And then you go to a place where you have a infinite supply, effectively, of sweet and salt and fat and calories. And then you get a lot of obesity, you get a lot of laziness, and you get a lot of disaffected people. So you take that, you take people in shitty jobs that they don't like, without, I'm a big fan of Maslow's hierarchy, and these are people who have probably satisfied, it's not perfect, but bottom of the thing is like the biological needs. I mean, at the very bottom you have you need oxygen, right? And then you need water. If you're without oxygen for a few minutes, you die. If you're without water for a few days, you die. If you're without food for a few weeks, you die. And those are sort of like the bottom tier. And then you start getting past the biological needs. You need sleep, for example. Now, you can not sleep that much and still be fine, functional and survive. But trust me, not the happiest life. And if you're somebody who is being tortured by not sleeping, you're gonna suffer. It's not a good. And then you keep building on that. So you've got all that stuff, and then you need connections to people. Gaming kind of, imagine people have all these bottom needs by and large met in our society, give or take. There are a lot of people who don't, incidentally, and it's a thing that, it's a fucked up thing about our society, our civilization. There are people who are starving in this country, which is one of the wealthiest countries in history, not just in the world now. Nobody needs to starve. Nobody needs to be, have food be scarce, or, to have their fucking student lunch debt build up. This is not a thing that should exist in our country. But it does. It does. It's fucked up. But people, by and large, and especially I think these gamers, they've got those needs satisfied. They might have to struggle a little bit to be able to make rent and stuff, but they're kind of okay. They're at that level. And you start building up. Games give you sense of community, but not. It's a somewhat I'm not going to disparage it. I mean, online connections are as real as in-person ones in some sense. But there's a difference between people that you meet in a game and you're all participating in some kind of weird quest versus people that you work together with, or people who you have some hobby that you share or some interest. You're going traveling together, you're going to museums, you're climbing, you're hiking, any of these kinds of things. That's a different kind of community. I'm not saying you don't, like, the game thing is great. Having sports, friends, and team, by all means. But, I'm lumping games into sports, even though, not that physically challenging, but it's kind of a sport after a fashion. But you have that stuff, and a sort of synthetic community. And everything that you're doing in this game, just like in your life, doesn't mean a fucking thing. You're collecting shit, you're getting these skills that don't have that much application outside of the context of the game, or of games more generally. And you have that, so you've got all this shit. And you think about it, and some of these people do have education, which is kind of getting higher up on the hierarchy, but they're not anywhere near self-actualization, which is sort of like the traditional top of the hierarchy. The other one is kind of this, some people put a little thing on top where it's sort of beyond you're not just actualized as an individual, but you become actualized sort of in a collection of people. You sort of are attaining your highest, not just for yourself, but for others. A lot of people are not there. And I really think everybody can get there. We are a wealthy civilization. We have the resources, have the time. If we wanted to do it, everybody could get there. And frankly, in my book, that is really where we should be aiming. Everything, like government, should be centered around getting everybody as high up on that fucking thing as possible. It shouldn't be like, oh, here's some rich fat cat who wants to sell a bunch of bombs, and so let's see how we can get this guy to be, an extra $1 billion in his bank account, or, get this other asshole even richer, get somebody to not pay taxes, or it shouldn't be that stuff. Some other wanker wants to go off and make private subway tunnels without, actually contributing to the fuck those guys. But they're spending billions of dollars. This is not a thing that, about that guy, I do like, like some of the stuff that he's doing. I think rockets, fucking cool. Vertically landing, vertically taking off rockets, cool as hell. Orbital rockets that can come down and go back up and come down and be recycled quickly, cool as hell. And I do think it's great that we've had public money go into that. I don't think it's great that we've enriched somebody this much, though. I mean, it's good that, it's good that he is doing some of these things to some extent. It's good that the ball is being pushed forward and that we're developing these capabilities as a species. Not so great that this one asshole has so much of a concentration of wealth when others are so poor. On Twitter, constantly, I see people who really, they just like struggling. And a lot of them are, like sick, or they have an injury or whatever, and they're not able to get the stuff that they need. And it's not like we don't have those resources, we just don't allocate them that way. Some rich fuck can have more stuff that they can never possibly use. This is a fucked up situation. So it's interesting to me. I was thinking about this a lot. And you kind of look at the way this stuff works. I think these people, the Gamergate-ers, are kind of disaffected people who really, they're like on the cusp. Like they definitely know there's a problem, but they have this false bullshit solution, these are often also like the MRAs, or what are they called? Men's rights activists, yes. And the people who are kind of red pilling and all this bullshit. And they have these just scary, frankly, fascist nationalistic ideas, loaded with racism, loaded with sexism, and blaming people for their plights. But they're not, all of this stuff is an illusion that they've kind of been surrounded and conned into. And their whole thing, their whole shtick is like, you go on Twitter, and especially in 2014 at this time, if you were a woman on Twitter and you said something disparaging about them, you get fucking shitstormed. And you get people to threaten to kill you. You get people threatening that they're going to rape you. And not just a little bit, but like a constant barrage. To the point where you basically can't, at the time too, they didn't have good filtering. Now the filters kind of like quelch a bit of this. They don't really, it's still there. The Twitter has done jack shit to really like deal with this problem at a fundamental level. But the stuff is there, and you can at least live with it now. It's just more like, this constant splatter of shit coming up at you, and you have a windshield now. So it's not great, but it's a thing. So yeah, that's there. And I'm thinking about this, I'm like, really the fundamental things that are problems that these people really are experiencing, and they do have, I'm not denying at all, genuine underlying issues, but they're blaming their issues on women and on minorities and people who had nothing to do with creating this stuff. These are the people who frankly should be, like dragging fucking Bezos out of his bedroom. And I mean, I'm not serious about that exactly, but I mean, it's like, you should be almost to that level. You shouldn't be threatening some random woman who published something that you found disparaging about a game, or about, like, maybe, some woman says, maybe you shouldn't have a game that, maybe it'd be nice to have games that didn't have just women that were scantily clad with giant tits. I'm just spitballing here. And then they get a shitstorm directed at them because of that. It's like, but I do think these people, they're the people who probably more than anyone should be on board with not me, us, with like the whole Bernie Sanders, like fucking fix this shit kind of campaign. But they're fucking things up instead. It's annoying. You have Scott Adams, who's bolstered by these people. And I really do think a lot of the things that went into that, and I don't really, this has gone much longer than I was hoping, actually, or intentionally planning. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I do think a lot of the factors and a lot of the same, not necessarily the same people, although a lot of them I do think are the same people, but a lot of the same dynamics and approaches and really tactics and strategies are the reason that Trump got elected. And they're the reason that Brexit happened. And all around the world, tons of totalitarian things, tons of fascist and quasi-fascist, crypto-fascist regimes have kind of cropped up. I think this is really part of that upswell. And I think part of it also is that we never, like, reporters have this tendency, and I talk about journalistic malpractice a lot. I talk about, just this laziness, I'm not going to actually look into the situation, so I'm just going to say A and B are both equivalent. Super lazy. It makes it sound like, I've really done a lot of research and A has some points and B has some points, but they're, no, that's a bullshit. It's just cheat code, basically. If you actually do research and you're like, anti-vaxxers have like 1 or 2 points that are not completely insane, and then vaccines have like millions of points behind them, that are actually, there's a balance to be made. And the balance is not, one person says this and one person says this. I can't possibly know as a journalist. No, if you're a journalist, your duty, your job, and I really do mean duty, like literally to the rest of civilization, your responsibility is not to just present both sides as though they're equal, separate but equal. Not to present this fair and balanced artificial bullshit view. Your duty is to look and say, hey, I've done the research. These guys say that the earth is flat. These guys say that the earth is round. These guys are fucking crazy. There's no evidence that the Earth is flat. It's nuts. That's so fucking shit. The Gamergaters would get journalists or people calling themselves journalists, publications, to interview them, and it's like, oh well, they actually have a point. No, they don't have a point. There are kernels of truth, and like I said, there is an underlying like thing that they're responding to and that they're coming from that is legitimately a real problem. But it's not, what they're saying and what they're describing is not reality. And it has a complete disconnect with reality. So anyway, this is a thing that it struck me yesterday. I tweeted about it, and obviously because I had no foundation I was just talking out of my ass, and there's no basis in reality. I tweeted about it, and then nothing happened. Oh no, wait. I mentioned Gamergaters in a disparaging way yesterday, and I got hundreds of often sock puppets, but basically just nameless anonymous accounts, very low followers, people that I'm guessing probably are sock puppet accounts by and large, but it doesn't really matter. A couple blue check people that obviously are not sock puppets, but they're assholes who've kind of profited from this stuff, like Milo. No longer exists as far as I know. I don't know what happened to him, but people like that who would really take advantage of these people. And you get this stuff, and then I started, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me and why I do this. Started trying to talk to one of these people, and I'm like, let's have a conversation. And they're like, no, you don't think, you think this, and it's like, dude, I haven't said fucking shit, and you have already constructed my entire, not just my side, my position, you've constructed my entire arguments in your mind, and you've argued against them. It's fucking delusional, frankly. You can't have a conversation with somebody like this, because how can you talk to somebody who will not listen to you? Because they already think they know everything that you're gonna say, and frankly could not be fucking wronger. Novelty bad. You go back and forth a couple times, you try to say like, hey, no, you're wrong about that, but no, I'm not, I know. I'm like, okay, have a nice hell that you've created for yourself. And I think this is actually going to be the last thing that I talk about, because it was something that I said to this dude, and kind of anonymous account, I'm sure it's a dude, pretty much. Like, I think we could probably gather from the tone and the attitude and all this stuff. Very high confidence. Not 100%, like 97, 98% confidence, probably. This dude, just like, man. I mentioned to him the, allegory, I guess you'd call it, of the long spoons or the long chopsticks. There are different versions of this. This is a story I love, and it's one of these things. There are things that I've found, like there are certain things that you learn in life where you kind of learn it and, it's interesting and you file it away, and then, it's kind of like a whole thing and you've got it. You understand it. This is a thing, though, that I've kind of, and there are many of these too, I find these interesting. It's rich in the sense that, like you hear it and you're like, that's actually good and insightful. And then years later, you think about it again years after that. And each time it kind of has like an extra layer that you're peeling back, that you're like, I hadn't even considered this, or, you just kind of see it with new eyes because your perspective is broadened. And it's an interesting thing like that. So I'm going to do a terrible job of telling it. There's always a good way to introduce your story, is to say that this story's going to suck. It's not going to be interesting. It's going to be like disorganized. Probably not. It'll be fine, but not great. So basically, idea is you have these two guys. They come together, doesn't matter how. They're just on a bench together, and they're talking. One of them is living essentially in hell. One of them is living essentially in heaven. And the guy who's living in heaven asks the guy who's living in hell, like, what is it like? And the guy living in hell is like, it's horrible. It's terrible. It's torture. We're all starving. And there's this buffet, like basically meal, that has all this food, which is the most delicious food you could imagine. Just, the best food in the fucking world. My life, I've never even smelled things that smelled this good. But it's down here and I'm far away from it, and all I've got are these long chopsticks. And so I can reach the stuff with the chopsticks, or spoons, depending on which version you're. I can reach the stuff with the chopsticks, but they're so long that I don't have any way. They're much longer than my arm. I can't bring it to my mouth. So I've got the food there. I can see it. I can smell it. I can almost taste it, but I can't eat it. And it's just like the worst torture. How could you imagine such torture? And then the other guy is like, well, that's interesting, because heaven is very much like that. We have the same sort of things. We have basically exactly as you've described. Same situation. But the difference is that we feed each other. Yeah. And you kind of think about it. It's like, oh, those chopsticks, easy. You can't get it to yourself, but you can easily give it to somebody else. They can give it to you. And then you're like, holy shit. And the thing about this is that the dude in hell, which I am lumping all these Gamergaters, I believe that largely their existence, and when I say Gamergaters here, I mean the bigger version of this, whatever that is, I believe their existence is largely miserable and very unpleasant. I'm sure these are not people. These are the guys sitting there with the long chopsticks, trying to feed themselves, not, fuck everybody else, and they're just miserable and starving, and essentially in a hell of their own creation. And, I mentioned this to the guy. He's like, first off, I'm not quite sure I trust him, but he said, I said, have you heard this story? He's like, I'm familiar with it. I'm not sure that you're familiar with it. I'll take you at your word, but you seem like the kind of person that would be full of shit. But okay, you're familiar with it. Fucking apply that, I mean, if you are familiar with it, click the tumblers. Hey, maybe this applies to you. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. That's my thing. So I will have more solos to come. I will probably talk about them more. I'm going to try not to talk about the Gamergaters much because, it's exhausting and boring. It's so just dull. I don't, they can all go fuck themselves. Again, this is one of the, about these layers. When I first heard this story, I thought about it and I was like, well, shit, why don't the people, like now that you've explained it, why doesn't that guy just do it? Later in life, you start peeling this back and you're like, oh, they really just don't even think that way. And it's to such an extent that a lot of these people, even if you told them, even if you showed them, they won't even consider that possibility. I do hope that at some point they wake up and, stop fucking up the world. But barring that, what the fuck? More than that, I really hope that journalists start doing a better job, by and large. And by this, I mean don't repeat something. If Trump says something that is a outrageous lie, I'm on Twitter, I see The Hill or Politico or whoever the fuck tweet that Trump said X, Y, and Z. No context, no explanation, like this is not true, nothing, just echoing it, amplifying it, without saying Trump lied and claimed this, or something like that. As a journalist, that is your fucking responsibility. And if you're not doing that, you are just amplifying his bullshit. And when I say him, I mean anyone that wants to manipulate you. You are the soldiers, you are the generals, rather, in early mechanized warfare, sending wave after wave of troops up against tanks and machine guns. They're getting mowed down, and you just keep sending more without thinking, maybe I should change my fucking tactics. So I'm just begging you, please change your fucking tactics. That is all I wanted to say for now. So thank you, and Zai Jian.